To chair the opening panel, The Making of an Energy Legacy and the Decisions That Will Power the Future, please welcome Vice President, Energy and Infrastructure, and Morningstar Chair for Global Energy Security, Atlantic Council, Landon Darrence.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is great to be with you, and welcome to the Atlantic Council's 10th Global Energy Forum. Yes, we're just getting started. Look, we've covered a lot of ground. We've come from Iran to AI, from affordability to Venezuela, and recognizing that we're in the United States Capitol, and it's the 250-year anniversary. We really came into this year thinking, how do you make generational policy? It's not just about the tactical. It's not just about the near-term reactions to current events, which are important, I think we'll cover in this next panel, but it's also about how you take the decisions that world leaders are making, the government visions, and turn that into industry execution. And so I'm really excited to have a panel joining me for a discussion on making an energy legacy. And to do that, let me invite our panelists to the stage, beginning with Lorenzo Simonelli. He's the Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Baker Hughes, bringing Eimear P, who's the Chief Financial Officer of Chevron, Philip Haddad, Chief Executive Officer of XRG USA and President and Chief Executive Officer of Mazda Americas, and John O'Brien, Chief Executive Officer of JERA Americas. Team, please have a seat. Let's get comfortable. Well, I'm going to start off, Eimear, with you because I think, like I said, we've covered a lot of ground. And when we entered this calendar year, coming to the Global Energy Forum, what we thought we were going to do was have a conversation about affordability. The exact same panel a year ago was about AI. It was about this demand surge. And it's an election year, so we're thinking, okay, we're going to have some affordability discussions. What's the politics of this? And of course, January 3rd, Venezuela. And then even more so, February, we have the war in Iran. And I don't want to go there yet, but I do want to focus on this. Companies like Chevron in particular, you have roots that stretch back nearly 150 years. And that takes a little bit more foresight and a little bit of long-term planning and decadal planning. And so from Chevron's perspective, what does it mean to make decisions with those multi-decade time horizons, particularly when you have an environment and a world around you that's clearly anxious, that's fractured, that's tense? So how are we making these decisions for the long term?
Well, over 150 years, we've seen a lot. We've seen wars, we've seen technological breakthroughs, we've seen a lot of policy changes, and we've lived through a lot. And I think the simple lesson from 150 years is that decision-making that is made with a long term in mind, decision-making that can weather all of the events, normally wins. And so that's what we stay disciplined around when we're making decisions. We don't try and predict every cycle, every turn, every event, but we do try and be disciplined around making decisions that protect us in light of those events. And that comes down to the decisions really that we make around where we allocate our capital. And we've got choices on where we allocate our capital. And so we allocate capital to a range of assets, both here at home in the United States, but also around the world. And we take a view of the long term because those asset investments are decade investments. And so while it's tempting to get wound up in the here and the now and the weeks and the months, it's really important for us to stay pragmatic and keep that long term in mind because that's what we know wins, and that's been the success of our company.
Lorenzo, let me bring you into this too because Baker Hughes has an equally rich history, and through oil shocks, through technological revolutions, market transformations, current periods of conflict, you've, as a company, have dealt with this in the entire value chain. So when we're thinking about these strategic investments and capital allocations, how is a company like Baker Hughes separating energy investments that endure versus something that might get stagnant or fall off the radar quickly? Like, how are we making enduring investments in technology and in the energy space?
Well, Landon, it's great to be here, and congratulations to the Atlantic Council for a superb event so far. And I think, as was already mentioned with regards to capital allocation, it's critical to look at things from a long-term perspective. Baker Hughes is an industrialized energy solutions company. Now, what does that mean? We provide equipment and services that enable all of the energy sources to be provided to the world. And so as we think about being fit for the time, we have to make decisions that have 15 to 20 years forward-looking. And that comes to the technology side of picking where do we think energy expansion is going to happen? When is there going to be an aspect of natural gas going to LNG? What is the equipment that's required? How do you liquefy it? When do you see geothermal and enhanced geothermal coming into the play? And so much of what we're doing is anticipating where we think will be the future innovation and the technology that will enable the molecules to provide the electrons. And at the end of the day, we know a couple of fundamental truths. With growing population, energy demand is going up. That's been a constant, by the way. It's very rare that over the long term, energy demand is not increasing. The other macro trend is there is a view towards needing more different types of energy, because not one molecule can provide everything that's needed. And so you need to have the diversification of that sources of energy. And that's where we play and we make those decisions and we look at it from a long-term standpoint. So, you know, we are very much present today in LNG. And if you go back to the 1960s, 1970s, when we started investing in LNG, a lot of people said LNG is not going to be cost competitive. If you think about where solar is today and the aspect of competitiveness of solar in the right geographic conditions. Likewise, if you think about where we're going in the future with enhanced geothermal. So I think it's really picking those macro trends with the foundation of technology, and then you're going to have to be agile to manage the conflicts, the geopolitics that are going to be there. But there's very little that we do day in day that impacts the current.
Oh, but let's make a technological choice here. Is geothermal the LNG of 2040?
It is one of the LNGs of 2050, 2040, and in fact, you see the increasing trend because when you look at enhanced geothermal, from conventional geothermal, you're now able to get the electrons produced at a much lower temperature requirement. You've got the recycling of the consistent water that's actually there through the rock surface. So you look at companies that have already proven it. We're producing 5 wells with Fervo. It's going to be providing 5 wells, enough to power 180,000 homes. That is very competitive from a standpoint of increasing energy expansion with new energy sources.
Philip, building an energy legacy is, of course, not just a feature of U.S. energy dominance. It's a global, international story. And I'm thinking about, you know, XRG as a significant new entrant to the global energy side out of ADNOC, thinking about decisions on how to dedicate investments in both renewables and clean tech, but the value chain of energy. What does it tell us when we look at the United Arab Emirates and you have a major hydrocarbon producer? We talked about earlier today, there was discussion about UAE leaving OPEC, so it's an oil and gas producer, but also a major investor and developer of renewable and clean energy sources, nuclear as well. What does it mean to build an energy legacy that is so diverse, where you have such a broad mandate, and how do they fit together?
Well, firstly, thank you for having me on this panel, and congratulations on the 10th anniversary of the Global Energy Forum. It's good to be with friends and long-term partners. I think the world needs more energy and you know, needs more forms of energy. We are an investment company that's owned by the National Oil Company in Abu Dhabi. We are about a $150 billion company. We're focusing on 3 main verticals: the gas vertical, the chemicals vertical, which is energy adjacent, and what we call energy solutions. And we see, growth in all of these different energy sectors across the world, and especially in the United States, where the US market is a very critical part of our strategy globally, given the resource abundance, given the growth in demand that we're seeing in energy demand, given the investment environment that's very friendly to what we do. And we are here in the US across the chemicals sector, across LNG, and as you mentioned as well, through Masdar, we have about 5 gigawatts in operation and about a 12 gigawatt pipeline with a 25 gigawatt target by 2030. So we believe in an and approach to energy, given what we're seeing in demand, and we see additionality across all forms of energy, and that's where we're really focusing our attention. The world needs more energy. Doesn't matter really, that which part of energy generation we're looking at. As our chairman, Dr. Sultan Al-Jaber, said, there's not one source of energy that's going to be able to fulfill the requirements of this very complex and growing energy system. We need all forms of energy. And that's how we really think about a resilient and dynamic energy system. And that's really where we're focusing our attention.
One area of the world that really needs energy is East Asia. And John, I know your career spans the domestic market, the power market, but of course you represent JERA Americas here. And when I think of countries that had foresight about energy security, you can look at countries like Poland that built LNG terminals, but you can also look at countries like Japan who procured and had a very sophisticated procurement strategy for both supply of gas, but also of power and how to hedge some of those investments. And so, I just kind of want you to elaborate on JERA's decision to make, major bets in the United States. Why is that happening? But what does the current moment mean for Japan and for companies like JERA Americas as they're making long-term investments in energy security, really?
Well, first of all, thank you, Landon. Great to have dinner with you last night. That was a good dinner, but thank you for this great forum today, which is off to a great start. The answers before me, I think, speak to Japan's foresight in terms of thinking through how you provide energy to an island nation. And I'm also reminded of, there's a great piece that has just been recently aired, Frontline Japan, which centers a lot on JERA, but it talks about the precision within which we have to work to make sure we keep the lights on in Japan. And so these decisions and how you make decisions for the long term is vital. JERA is the largest power generator in Japan, which makes us probably one of the largest buyers of LNG in the world. We have 11 regasification facilities in Japan to supply our power plants. We also, after Fukushima, did have to build some supercritical coal because of bringing down the nuclear units in Japan. So we are very experienced at operating and maintaining, keeping the lights on, our obligation in Japan. But that also leads us to think about where we should invest throughout the globe to make sure not just that we are answering our obligation in Japan, but also to bring some of our know-how to other parts of the world. So here in JERA Americas, we're very excited. We began, our two shareholders are Chubu Electric and Tokyo Electric. And I think the beginnings in the US really were around Chubu Electric learning about US electricity markets and buying into some of the generation plants, primarily in the Northeast. And that has enabled us to build a power generation side of our business. We are minority owners in the Freeport export facility, which is a tremendous story of turning an import facility to an export facility. And we also toll gas out of that Freeport facility. So we are very excited about the opportunities here in America, both to expand our investment in LNG, to broaden our portfolio of LNG. So we have announced some investments going forward between now and 2030 to expand how much LNG we export out of the US. We're building a blue ammonia facility in partnership with CF Industries near Donaldsonville, Louisiana, and we will use that ammonia to fire our coal plant, the Hekinan Power Station in Japan. And we've just recently purchased from GeoSouthern an upstream facility in the Haynesville, which is a brand new side of the business for us here in the US. So we're very excited about the US, the investment opportunities in the US, remembering always our obligation to keep the lights on in Japan, but also knowing that we can bring some know-how to not only grow JERA, but expand throughout the world.
There's some long-term thinking there, but I mean, we already heard from Sheikh Nawaf this morning. Chris Wright was talking about Iran policy with Brian on stage, and so I don't want to miss having such an esteemed group of executives on stage and not talk about the crisis, because it has to shape something. So we can think long-term, but there's a consequence. And you know, Philip, maybe it's appropriate to go back to you, because ultimately the Middle East is the epicenter of what's going on right now. And when I think about UAE and in particular XRG or ADNOC, a lot of conversations about deploying resilient capital across the global value chain, not just the UAE value chain. You know, the urgency of the moment, how is this going to pull investments? Is it going to change into a near-term energy security imperative? Is it going to have long-term repercussions on how a company like yours reevaluates what the 20-year outlook looks like? Are they really in tension? Are those just very natural aspects of the business process?
I think, you know, XRG is a long-term, thoughtful investor. I think what makes us different is we have the investment discipline, but also deep technical expertise, and we invest as owners. So by definition, we have to think about the long term and the short term at the same time. And I think what you just mentioned and what we heard earlier today only emphasizes the fact that these two speeds operate at the same time. They have to be complementary. You know, we have to think about resilience, you know, across the entire energy value chain. And you know, these two concepts are not mutually exclusive. You know, the short term and the long term, you know, are only being put to the test right now. And I think building resiliency, being diversified, is very important, and that's what we're doing at XRG. I mean, XRG is investing globally. The US, as I said, is a very important part of what we're doing globally in the energy sector. And we have to think in terms of resiliency and diversification, and you have to think about these two dynamics at the same time. I don't think they're mutually exclusive, but I really think they're complementary.
Eimear, we had a conversation last night about scenarios and the variety of outcomes of what can happen in the world. And so I want to kind of bring this similar question to you about how the near-term events are impacting Chevron's outlook on investment priorities. And I want to do it from two angles. One is, of course, how are we changing how we deploy capital, but two is geography. When this happened, you know, look, there's a lot of hope for a very strong future in the Middle East, but there's also a very broad perspective that places like Venezuela or Canada or some, you know, the Western Hemisphere, West Africa, become more investable. And so certainly this is having an impact on the future of Chevron.
Yes, well, I think when a fifth of the world energy supply is disrupted, I think it really reinforces that energy security and energy resilience, whether short, medium, or long term, that they're the same conversation. And you can't really have one without the other. I think when you look at the energy system today and the buffers that were mentioned earlier in Secretary Wright's session, I mean, we're only able to weather today because of the long-term decision-making behind the building of all of those buffers. And the same goes for our portfolio in Chevron, the resilience that we have today, and also what we need to consider as we move forward. And so today reinforces resilience really matters. In Chevron, we don't have a lot of disruption because of the Middle Eastern conflict. Only 5% or less than 5% of production is in fact impacted, but we've still had to optimize the portfolio we've had to deliver the energy the world needs. We've had to take crudes that never went to Asia. We've had to send them to Asia to help keep our joint venture refineries full and working at high reliability, because that's where the pinch was felt first. We've had to take some of our crudes from the US and send more of that to Europe because that was where the constraints were felt as well. In the US, we're much more insulated because of that long-term thinking and because of the resilience in the portfolio. So what we have is a resilient portfolio. We've a balance of short and long term. We've got a balance of geographical assets. So we're not only in the US, North America, we're in South America and growing there. And we can feed Europe through our Kazakhstan and Eastern Mediterranean assets, and we're positioned with legacy assets in Australia and in Asia as well. So I think this resilience of the portfolio, how intentional we are as we build the portfolio is really important. And our own portfolio is being tested today with what we're experiencing. As we go forward, geography is always going to matter because we're never going to get the price right. We're never going to time the cycles right. We're never going to know exactly what technological breakthrough is going to enable. We have to know that whatever world we find ourselves in, whatever the themes are, whatever the trends are, that we'll be competitive and that we will be successful in all of those. And that's why the scenario planning is so important, and that's why diversification of the portfolio is absolutely core to our strategy, and that's what we focus on.
But you know, if I was to drill down a little bit further on this, if you're only a fraction of global supply, right? No single company is 25%. You look at Aramco would be what? Maybe 10% of the market, 8% of the market. Not everybody is making decisions as sophisticated and as intentional as a company like Chevron is. And so sometimes you still have to react to a market where there's actors that are not optimizing. And they're going to have a direct impact on the future of your company.
Yeah, and the agility of your portfolio, so making long-term decisions, but in the here and now, having the levers in your portfolio that allow you to adjust. So when I mentioned having long cycle and short cycle, having crude production in different parts of the world, they're the result of long-term decision making, but in the here and now, they're levers that you can pull. And so it's that agility that you want to be able to have as you take those long-term decisions so that you know in any environment you're going to be okay.
Lorenzo, bringing in maybe another variable is supply chains. And just thinking about, even if we know the outcomes of where the scenarios are headed, do we have the capacity, are we able to actually deliver in terms of infrastructure and equipment? You know, when we hear stories of bottlenecks and we hear, gas turbines are delayed or can't be booked for years to come, what's the real outlook here?
So just to touch on what's already been said, because I think it's important, you've had diversification, you've had resilience, and you've had the aspect of security. And unfortunately, sometimes we become complacent. And we've seen these cycles before where we become too used to the norm and a shock happens, which then drives an incremental need for a build cycle. And that's what we're going through now. Build cycle of energy security being a focus with incremental pipelines being needed. We know there's a lot of resource in the Middle East. We know that there's areas of the world that now are coming into the fray. Argentina, for example. We know the Vaca Muerta and their opportunity to produce LNG. We know Guyana. And so you're seeing the aspect of what happens when there's a shock in the system. And we as an equipment and service provider have to be able to provide that supply chain. We're only a small portion of it, though. And I think actually from a supply chain perspective, you're going to have some constraints as you're seeing today, as is commonplace with large turbines and the aspect of actual utility scale power that takes time. And so you're moving towards distributed power generation. And you've got smaller turbines, such as the industrial gas turbines that we produce, that can be provided to the hyperscalers. Now, there's also an ecosystem that you need across the supply chain, though. It's not just the providing the equipment and the service. It's the labor that's required. It's the engineering procurement company that's involved. It's also the permitting. And that ecosystem needs to come together. And I'd say it is mixed because not everything is as smooth as it could be. And I think you heard Secretary Wright say also some decisions that are made by one stakeholder don't necessarily align with what the ecosystem needs and can actually deliver some negative results. And that's what we need to drive consistency in, is the discussion to have the ecosystem aligned with where we need to go. At this stage, we need to build infrastructure. The infrastructure can be built. At the same time, we need permitting reform. We need also the investment to be there. And I think there is a backwards pressure now from what's occurred, that people are looking at this and actually focused on it. It will take some time. There'll be some bumps along the way. I can speak from an equipment and service perspective of what we do as Baker Hughes. We think that given the innovation and the technology, we'll be there and able to provide that. We need everybody else to be at the party as well, and that's bringing the stakeholders together.
Ultimately, this conference is about the geopolitics of energy, both of how energy affects geopolitics and how geopolitics affect the energy outlook. And I think that one aspect of that dialogue is always about the US-China relationship. Are we competing fast enough to unlock some of these opportunities domestically in the United States, or frankly in Europe or the Middle East and other geographies, to compete against what really looks like a monolithic and powerful effort by the Chinese to have the energy system of the future in their grasps?
I think you've heard it before, and also Secretary Wright mentioned it. If you look at the US versus China, China focused on the electrification and the infrastructure from an electrification standpoint. If you look at what they've done in the last 20 years, it is meaningfully growth versus what they had, and the US hasn't. The resource is available in the US. So there is the opportunity for that to be corrected as we go forward with the right policies and also the right ecosystem being created, which comes down to permitting reform. It comes down to enabling the technologies to be adopted quickly and actually taking away some of these long cycle procedures. We used to do things in 2 years that now take 7 years. Why? And how do we go back to really reducing some of that bureaucracy and some of that red tape, and also between the federal and the state level? And I think this administration, we very much complementary with what they're trying to do. And also that is the way in which we can continue to increase the electrification that's required within the United States to continue to stay ahead of the hyperscale.
So a build cycle, but a build cycle that's maybe more lethargic than it needs to be. Let's get it moving.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be going through phases, and right now there's a lot of infrastructure build being talked about globally. And the discussions we're in is not just in the Middle East, where we're talking about pipelines and we're talking about additional sites. It's also in South America, it's North America, and there's a lot of acceleration of final investment decisions that are being made, because it's not demand destruction. The demand's still going to be there. And as this gets resolved, there's a consumption that's there at the end.
John, let's build on this. I know Jerry Americas is thinking about permitting reform as well. You're thinking about what the investment needs, or what the policy frameworks need to be to match the investment and business decisions that a company like yours is making. What needs it? Let's move to action. What are we doing, and why?
I think that when you think about this here in the US, of course, we have the federal government, we have 50 states, we have power markets in part of the state and regulated markets elsewhere. So it really, at all levels, there has to be a thinking around how we deal with permitting reform, and I'll come to cost in a minute. But Secretary Wright in this administration has been noted, and he said it today, Secretary Wright and the administration are really working hard on this notion on permitting reform, and really thinking through and pushing ways in which we can narrow down, give people their rights, to make sure that people are intervening, but also how can we think through hastening some of this infrastructure build that we need. I do think it is incumbent on not just those of us in the power industry, and I think we've dealt with community affairs in our industry and how you build a strategy, I think AI companies also have to do that. I think what Secretary Wright spoke about the benefits of AI, the national security needs of AI, I think AI companies do have to put more into community information, community building, how you build support, and how you take on the fear caucus or the fear industry, as Secretary Wright spoke about it. Because I think there is a bit of a vacuum around information. Just the comment this morning, the comment alone about where prices are higher versus where they're lower, and correlating that to where data centers are trying to site, I think is a very interesting point. So I think there is the need to, and there's permitting reform legislation, I know, a mile away, as someone said, but I think that this has to happen at the state and the federal level. The other thing is, hyperscalers, I do think, are willing, because of speed, are willing to pay to get that power online, even if it's behind the meter. We do, however, obviously need power to meet demand in the markets we're in. And one of the problems there, of course, is market design. And what is the cost of new entry and how you incent that demand, which is very difficult. And in ancient times, I was a state senator in Massachusetts and worked on our electric utility restructuring law. And I think if I had if I knew then what I know now, I think we would have thought about markets differently, because basically we're in these regional markets where it's an hourly price and a capacity market price. And both of those prices, together with some of the other products you can deliver as a generator, are not really matching what it costs to build the power that's needed. So it really is incumbent upon a lot of people in this room and those in the AI industry to really build on how we educate our neighbors about what is it so important about beating China, about the importance of this in our country. It's about the permitting reform that's needed in the federal level, but also throughout the states. And then it's thinking through how we think about cost and how actually the hyperscalers probably can help a bit on that.
We're getting close on time here, and Eimear, before I shift to global partnerships, I want to come back to you on one aspect that I don't feel has been talked about. We covered permitting reform well, we covered supply chains well, but also people and investment in people. And a lot of times when I'm talking to global executives, I'm hearing that we need to invest in the workforce of the future as well. And I'd be interested in how Chevron's doing that and how important that is to this story as well.
Yeah, well, we're the human energy company, and so people are at the heart of everything we do. It's critical that we have not only professionals to run the company today, but also that we're attracting professionals for the future. And so we are very active, obviously, in promoting our industry as best we can, because it's an exciting industry to be a part of. It's a noble industry to be a part of. It's very technical, and so what we try and do is attract the best and the brightest, because we need problem solvers, not only for today, but for the future. We're also very active in trying to bring into the organization more digitally savvy and AI first of a workforce. And so we have various ways to do that, but we are seeing AI accelerate in the company. We're applying it across every value chain, and we know that we will be successful when we integrate AI into everything we do. We're on a mission to do that. We need to have the right professionals that can do that as well. So the combination of just promoting the industry because of how great it is, but also evolving with the times as well, and ensuring that we're fully leveraging the full technological toolkit that is available today.
Well, we need the right professionals. We also need the right partnerships. And when I look around the room and I see the Atlantic Council Global Energy Center, for many of you, you know that started in the UAE with us. We've been there for a long time in Abu Dhabi. And Philip, maybe you can, final question here is really about the US-UAE energy partnership and how it's evolving, because this is such a core aspect of what the Global Energy Center is and what the Global Energy Forum is about building those enduring partnerships. And certainly between the Atlantic Council and UAE, ADNOC and XRG, that's in a legacy relationship. And love to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure. Look, this year marks the one-year anniversary of President Trump's visit to the UAE and the commitments that our chairman, Dr. Sultan Al-Jaber, has made to energy investments in the US. To date, ADNOC, Masdar, and XRG have invested around $85 billion in the energy sector in the US. Between our investment in the Rio Grande LNG facility, which is one of the largest in the world, between the footprint that our chemicals businesses have in the US, in about 11 sites in 19 states, together with what we're doing with Masdar, over 3,000 employees in the chemical sector only through Covestro and Nova Chemicals and Borouge International. So, as I said earlier, the US is a very important part of XRG's investment strategy globally because of the three key components that we see. Number one, the abundant resource in the energy sector. Number two, the ability to do business. Number three, demand. I mean, we're all witnessing this incredible energy demand in the US. So for us, that's core to the partnership, but also building a resilient, dynamic energy system and being a good energy partner to the world. And that's really how we continue to advance this very important partnership.
With our fleeting seconds, final question to each of you. We're about a month away from the United States celebrating its 250-year anniversary. And so if we're sitting here, well, maybe not us, but somebody else is sitting here in the tricentennial in 276, what do you want to be able to say your organization did 50 years from now? This is a legacy play, legacy conversation. Lorenzo?
I think with the adoption of AI, the speed at which we can develop the equipment and the services and the productivity on an operational aspect of delivering electrons through molecules to the world and satisfying the appetite we have for energy that I think has been said is foundational to life.
Eimear?
I'd want somebody to say that Chevron was a company that figured out in the 1800s how to get oil out of rock and is still doing that with excellence and powering the intelligence age.
Philip?
I think, being a good partner, globally a responsible and committed partner to supplying, energy responsibly, all forms of energy to the world, to continue to meet the growing demand that's really driven by everything we said around economic development, AI, and all of the above. I think that would be a legacy worth, being remembered for.
John closes out.
I think that we would hope that the cherry blossoms that are a gift of Japan are still always blossoming here in the spring in Washington, D.C., and that that is an example of decades down the road that the Japan-U.S. alliance is foundational to interdependence throughout the world, and that alliance only continues us to strengthen, and that from a JERA perspective, we demonstrate elsewhere how you keep the lights on in a very challenging way on an island nation.
Well, as a DC resident, I hope the lights are on and the cherry blossoms are blooming as well. And I really appreciate each of your time on this panel. And thank you for the audience. And thank our panelists for our first panel of the 10th Global Energy Forum.